Welcome to meeting 38 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Official Languages. Pursuant to the order of reference of May 30th, 2022, the committee is resuming its study of Bill C-13, an act to amend the Official Languages Act, to enact... Mr. Chair, we can't hear you. The sound is not loud enough in the room. My apologies, but you can hear me. Now we can hear you. It's important to hear you, Mr. Chair. So I'll resume where I was. I'm calling this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting 38 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Official Languages. Pursuant to the interpreter would like to request that we turn off the microphones in the room. Pursuant to the order of reference of Monday, May 30th, today's meeting is being held in a hybrid format in accordance to the order of the House adopted on Thursday, June 23rd, 2022. Members may participate in person or using the Zoom application. To ensure the meeting runs smoothly, I would like to pass along some instructions to witnesses and members. Before you speak, please wait for me to call your name. If you're participating online, click on the microphone icon to turn on your microphone. Please make sure to mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Regarding interpretation, for those of you on Zoom, you can choose at the bottom of the screen between the floor, English, or French. For those of you who are in the room, you can use the earpiece and choose the channel you'd like to hear. I remind you that all comments from members and witnesses should be directed to the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For those of you who are on Zoom, please use the virtual raise hand function. The clerk of the committee and I will do our best to maintain a speaking order. We thank you in advance for your patience and your understanding on this front. As per our routine motion, I would like to inform the committee that all witnesses have completed the required login test before the meeting, and I would like to welcome our witnesses now. So today, we have the Association des Conseils Scolaires des Écoles Publiques de l'Ontario with their president, Denis Chartrand, and Isabelle Girard, executive director. We also have Université de Saint-Boniface with Sophie Bouffard, president, who is joining us online. Welcome to these witnesses. As we usually proceed, you will each have 5 minutes for opening remarks. I'm very strict about time to make sure that all members have time to ask questions. I'll be very strict about the time. That being said, let's start with the Association des Conseils Scolaires des Écoles Publiques de l'Ontario. You have 5 minutes. Welcome. Hello, and thank you for inviting the Association des Conseils Scolaires des Écoles Publiques de l'Ontario, the ACEPO. I'm the president. I'm here with Isabelle Girard, executive director. I'm also the outgoing president of the Association nationale des conseils francophones that has already communicated their point of view, and it is very similar to mine. Professionally, I am a retired engineer. The ACEPO represents public school boards that are French. We manage 140 schools, and we provide quality education in French. Bill C-13 is a step in the right direction, but tangible and realistic changes are required to make this bill successful to reach our objective, which is to guarantee the future of French and its culture. We need efficient coordination and no duplication. We need positive measures that are both indicated and necessary. Today, we are asking for very specific amendments. They've been requested in the past. They have been presented in the binder that was presented to you this morning in tab 1. ACEPO needs to have more schools to provide more children a French education. We need to access available land to build schools. This is a challenge for the implementation of Article 23 of the Charter. There are many sites that are not in use, and our members are not gaining access to these sites. Often, too late, they learn through the news that a site was sold. A solution would be to give school boards, French school boards, the opportunity to purchase federal sites at market rate. We're not asking you for charity when they are sold. Mr. Chair, your committee in 2018 went to Vancouver and witnessed the issue there. The lack of a site to build a new school has been unavailable for 20 years. The government started the process of selling a site that would respond to their needs. This process started in 2005. The school board still doesn't have a school on Main Street. There are situations like this throughout Canada from coast to coast. This is why your committee in 2019 recommended that the Official Languages Act include an article about schools in official language minority situations. That school boards be considered a priority in the excess land sales of the federal government. C13 still doesn't speak to this. Mr. Chair, you signed this report. Mr. Généreux, you signed it. Mr. Sanson, you did too. The Honorable Mona Fortier also signed this report. I mention it because she is now the president of the Treasury Board, and it's up to her. She has the power, but not the obligation, to improve the process. The directive that's been in place since 2006 said that when federal institutions sell off a piece of land, they should take into consideration the communities, including official language minority groups. Despite this, school boards were ignored. Many have asked that the Official Languages Act be amended to include a right of first refusal on federal lands that were being sold. You have 30 seconds, Mr. Chartrand. The directive was changed last year. We would have expected this to be good, but it wasn't improved. What I just read to you, which was from the 2006 directive, disappeared. Now, federal institutions only have the obligation to advise official language minority groups that they have the intention of unloading a piece of land. They don't say when or how. Thank you, Mr. Chartrand. This is all the time we have, but you'll be able to tell us more through the questions that will be asked of you. We are now moving on to Ms. Bouffard from St. Boniface University. You have the floor for 5 minutes. Mr. Chair, members of the Standing Committee on Official Languages, good morning. I would like to thank you for inviting me to appear before you today as the president of the Université de St. Boniface. My comments will be limited to the various aspects of Bill C-13 that relate directly to post-secondary education. I'd like to start by underscoring some of the advances and strengths of Bill C-13 as it was introduced. The fact that federal institutions will now be required to take appropriate positive measures to ensure that Francophone minorities have more opportunities for quality learning throughout their lives, from early childhood to post-secondary education, is a significant change from the previous bill. More tellingly, this commitment recognizes the particular circumstances and the vulnerability of French in this country and emphasizes the need to support sectors essential to the development of Francophone minorities and to protect and promote the presence of strong institutions that serve these communities. Université de St. Boniface is one of these flagship institutions for the Francophonie, but its ability to survive is challenged. Bill C-13 rightly recognizes the pivotal role that post-secondary institutions play in achieving these objectives. St. Boniface University is actively working with its education and community partners to build the broad continuum of education in Manitoba. But you can't have a strong early childhood to grade 12 education sector without post-secondary institutions that are solidly rooted in their communities and positioned to continually innovate. Our universities and colleges are not only relevant in the disciplinary silo of education, they are also essential to supporting our communities in health and social services, wealth building, and more. We are now able to confirm the contribution that universities contribute to intellectual life, training of a bilingual workforce, technological and social innovation, and the transmission of language and culture, and the creative of inclusive social and cultural spaces in French. The study called The Language of Work of Graduates of French Language, English Language, and Bilingual Post-Secondary Institutions, published by Statistics Canada in April 2022, supports this. 49% of USB graduates go on to careers where they primarily work in French. It's an important indicator of the fact that we need such graduates in Manitoba and also elsewhere. Our programs are therefore of strategic importance. We have 3 suggestions for you. In the bill, the federal government recognizes the importance of a collaboration between the provincial and territorial governments. Of course, it is necessary to ensure that federal investments remain structuring, but the funding mechanisms need to be reviewed. For example, last summer, Canadian Heritage issued a call for proposals as part of the $121 million fund to support minority institutions. The USB was unable to submit a project. There were many reasons for this. The timeframe was too short to develop a new ad hoc project, and it was not enough time to consult with the province, which was not in a position to provide matching support, and the university had already reached its limit of self-financing new initiatives. Moreover, the new recurring provincial investment of $1.4 million to enhance education and nursing programs to address staffing shortages could not be viewed as the provincial match for a one-time project. This is unfortunate. The bill must lead to effective mechanisms that ensure equity across the country and that have lasting benefits. Let's talk about scientific research in French. In this regard, the bill states that one of the areas in which federal institutions could take positive measures to support the creation and dissemination of information in French that contributes to the advancement of scientific knowledge in any discipline. This statement seems restrictive. In the interest of a substantive equality, it should be revised to make these measures more structuring for minority post-secondary institutions, which are generally primarily devoted to teaching and more responsive to the needs of the Francophonie. I'm going to close by talking about Francophone immigration policy. We would like to express one wish that the policy take into account the international student population of post-secondary institutions. This is an important avenue for immigration and economic and social integration in our minority communities. Thank you.
Madame Bouffard,
Thank you. Thank you. 4 seconds left. Wonderful. We'll start with the first round of questions. In the way things are going, each political party will ask you questions, 6 minutes each. And we begin the first round with Mr. Gaudette, first Vice President of this committee. You have the floor, sir, for 6 minutes. Thank you, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today to improve Bill C-13, an act to amend the Official Languages Act. I don't know that's a goal of the present government, but that's another problem. Sir, Mr. Chartrand, in your opening remarks, you spoke about duplication. And if we want to be efficient, we have to eliminate duplication. What exactly did you mean by that? Thank you for your question. At present, as is indicated in the bill, nobody's in charge. There's not one champion. who would see that all departments are doing what they're supposed to do. And actually, that's what's happening. And the departments, whether they are promoting French or not, or whether or not they're helping. So we need one champion for this particular legislation. And the guidelines, as I mentioned earlier, from Treasury Board have to be more than guidelines and regulations. We have to live with legislation. So it's up to the government to deal with this issue of disposal of lands in the way that we have proposed. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chartrand. We've heard you, and we'll do our research. I have another question, though. When you talk about a champion, what are you thinking about? Are you thinking about Treasury Board? Because we on this side of the table in the Conservative Party have heard a variety of organizations who all say that this is a sine qua non condition. It is something that has to be done. It will stop the decline of French, and it will protect the French language. There has to be one leader, one captain of the ship. Is that your solution? Is that something that must be the case for you too? Yes. You mentioned as well, Mr. Chartrand, that different members of the committee, Mr. Sanson, Madame Fortier, Monsieur Généreux, have signed the agreement. At the time, Madame Fortier was not president of the Treasury Board, but she is now. Have you had any exchanges with her as president of the Treasury Board and you as head of your organization to improve the legislation? Not with ACEPO, but at the school. But the school board, where I do sit, has written to Mr. Duclos, who was replaced by Madame Fortier. She replied that the current guidelines allowed communities to grow, and I don't agree with that. So, are you saying to me then that the president of the Treasury Board replied to your request that what was in the legislation at the time when she answered sufficed? Well, I ask you the question. That's her interpretation. Is it true? You who are working daily on the ground to defend the French fact in Ontario, is that what she has said? We need a champion. We need it to be in the legislation. It has to be in the law so it can operate, so it can function. Another question. Mr. Chartrand, do you think that you would prefer to see a less rigid piece of legislation which would allow legislators in place to make regulations to protect the French fact, which is the goal of the legislation? Answer. Well, as I said earlier, when I cross a bridge, I'd like it to be well constructed. So with the renewal of the Official Languages Act should be properly dealt with. It should be properly reviewed. This is music to my ears, Mr. Chartrand. I completely agree with you that this legislation will allow French to get through the resistance that it is facing at the present time. And if the legislation has no teeth, there will not be any more French in Canada 5 years from now. It is in decline. Once again, if nothing is done, French will decline. I certainly agree with your comments. But I do have another question. The Commissioner for Official Languages has made recommendations. Are you aware of his recommendations? I've heard about it, but not the details firsthand. I'll ask you another question about the central agency. Are you able, and here I insist once more on the word, it is a sine qua non condition for Bill C-13 to become effective legislation. Do you think that Treasury Board is the only option to have one captain of the boat? 25 seconds. It has to be a bill with teeth that allows us to defend the French fact. Yes. A question for the president of the Université de Saint-Boniface. Do you think that for OLMCs, this is the only way that you at Université de Saint-Boniface and also throughout Canada, that the clause dealing with that is the way to go? That's an excellent question, but it'll be for the next round, I'm afraid. Mr. Marc Serre, Parliamentary Secretary for this committee, will have the next round of questions. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you to our witnesses, Mr. Chartrand, Madame Girard. I also was on the school board in Ontario at one point, and I thank you for the work that you do because it's ongoing work in Ontario. Thank you for the recommendations that you make. We're going to look at them in terms of amendments at clause by clause. So thank you for your recommendations. This week, we heard the CFFC, and thank you for all that work that is done at the secondary school level. We've had about 12 committee meetings, 54 witnesses, some 20 briefs that have been submitted to the committee dealing with Bill C-13. And everybody says they want it to pass as quickly as possible. We can look at the amendments. We can look at the clause by clause. Do you agree that Bill C-13 should be passed as quickly as possible? Well, listen, I'm not a jurist, nor am I a politician, but this being the case, I think that it should be the subject of discussion, and it has been, in fact, for some years now. And I want to have something that is quite perfect, but not utopian. I work in an area where we strive for excellence, but we do not want to make the perfect the enemy of the good. I want to see mechanisms for one-time issues in the bill. And that's it for my brief comments. Thank you, Madame Bouffard. Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that the clerk will give to all the members of the committee. I read the motion per se, and it will be sent to all the members of the committee. The motion is that in the case of the study of Bill C-13, an act to amend the Official Languages Act to enact the use of French in federally regulated private businesses act, and to make related amendments to other acts. 1. The Minister of Official Languages, the President of the Treasury Board, and the Minister of Immigrations, Refugees should be invited to appear at the latest Thursday, November 17, 2022. And second, amendments to Bill C-13 should be submitted to the clerk in both official languages at the latest by 5 p.m. Eastern Time. On this 17th, in November 2022, and should be dealt with Friday thereafter. And the clerk should agree to all members of the committee who are not members of a caucus but represented at committee, and all independent members to inform them about the committee's work on the bill, inviting them to submit any type of amendments that they may have to suggest to the committee to review the bill in question by clause. And 4, that the committee undertake clause by clause or at the latest Tuesday, November 22nd, 2022. And 5, if the committee has not yet done the clause by clause at noon Eastern Standard Time, December 1, 2022, all other amendments submitted to the committee would be deemed to have been submitted and presented for a vote without debate, and all other articles and amendments thereto. and each of the questions necessary to dispose of the clause by clause for this bill, as well as all questions necessary, required rather, to report to the House, be given to the chair so that the chair report to the House as quickly as possible. I submit my motion to the committee. You have heard that my feeling is it is now the time to act. On a point of order. We can't hear you, Chair. Just a minute. Mr. Boulouris, I'm putting your name down. You're the first to put your hand up. No, Chair, it's not Mr. Boulouris who is entitled to speak here. I am. Mr. Beaulieu is on a point of order. Thank you, Mr. Godin. Just a minute, please. I has just received in my email the motion. Has everybody received it? No, we haven't. Before we talk about points of order, it's a very long motion. Has everybody got the motion? Can you check to see, colleagues, if you have gotten the motion? Members of the committee, have you gotten the motion? Madam Clerk, can you check with the members? Thank you. Did you receive it, Mr. Beaulieu? Well, we need time to look at it and read it. I think it's a pity that that this is occurring when we're hearing witnesses. Just a minute. Mr. Godin and then Mr. Beaulieu. Chronological order. I wish to make the same request as my colleague did. Can you give us a few minutes to read and consider the motion in view of the fact that we are in a committee where we are supposed to be asking questions of our witnesses, but unfortunately the party has decided to intervene at this time. That's my personal opinion. It's a pity. Mr. Godin, we will take 2 or 3 minutes to consider the motion and we will come back. Madam Clerk, Chair, are we suspended? What's the process? You're muted, Mr. Chair. Oh, I'm so sorry. We'll suspend for 2 minutes to give everybody the chance to read the motion. 2 minutes. I'm timing. Mr. Gaudin, and then Mr. Beaulieu. On the motion, please. Chair, just allow me to make a few comments on this way of proceeding on the part of the Liberal government to table a motion like this, which is really a gag order. They are gagging us. They are muzzling us when we are working in collaboration, and we have shown that in the past, the Bloc Québécois, the NDP, and the Conservatives have worked together seeking one goal, a single goal, to improve the bill so that French is protected in Canada, so that French will stop its decline, to encourage people to use French more, to develop this language, which is one of the founding languages of this country. I would remind the Prime Minister, Mr. Chair, that Canada is a bilingual country. And I would say this is what bilingualism means. It is English and French. And as long as I am a member at the House of Commons, I will fight to protect French. I find it unacceptable, all this. You, Chair, as an Acadian, and all our other colleagues who are Acadian, Franco-Ontarian, or Quebecers in the government act in this way, not to protect French, to accelerate. I ask you to accelerate they want to accelerate the process, to say that December the 1st is the deadline, and if we do not have the time to pass all the amendments, all the clauses, you as a chair will put the question forthwith and successively without further debate on all remaining clauses and amendments. That is unacceptable. I find it shameful, Mr. Chair, that you have adopted this attitude. You asked for our cooperation, and this is the attitude of a person that is merely trying to manage their political interests in terms of bilingualism in Canada, rather than protecting the French fact in Canada. Mr. Chair, I am disappointed by this attitude, and I do hope that you will see reason. This is a bill, this is legislation that is historic, and if you want French to continue here in Canada, we have to take the time that is necessary. We have a witness who's an engineer this morning who said it himself. He said we have to take the time that is necessary. You've cut that questioning off, and that type of attitude, a good witness like that said, we have to take the necessary time. It's like building a bridge. It has to be well built. If the bridge fails, it'll be like the French language failing. I am always ready to fight for French in Canada. I find continuing on this motion, I just find it unacceptable that you try to do indirectly what we cannot do directly, and I will explain.
Let me explain. You're doing little politics by giving the ministers the last words at the end of this study. If I read between the lines, what I'm hearing here, I mean, before you continue, I'd like to remind you that I'm the chair, and you're speaking to me as if I wrote the motion, and you're calling me out personally. But I would like you to continue with caution. Well, as you know, I'm supposed to direct my comments to the chair. I'm following the rules. I respect authority. But what I'm trying to say, Mr. Chair, is that what I'm seeing from the current government is that they do not have the intention of protecting French. There are two groups within this government, and there are those who are protecting French that are not being heard. Mr. Chair, I hope this. I hope that my colleagues opposite will adjust their motion. Otherwise, I will present an amendment. Thank you, Mr. Godin. Mr. Beaulieu, you have the floor on the motion. I think this is a true gag order. The Official Languages Act has been operating under the same principles for 52 years. We haven't modified it since 1988. And in all of this time, the Liberals have not been hearing the French Canadians. When I was the chair of the Société Saint-Jean-Baptiste, I was invited to speak in Parliament, and we told the organization that, he's not representing a minority. He has no business being here. And that's what happened. I tabled a motion. We were supposed to study the situation of French in Quebec. It was going to be the first time since the Official Languages Act was enacted. That tells you how much people don't care about French in Quebec. Then the Quebec government produced some demands. None of the demands, with very general intentions, were accepted. This is unbelievable. And now they're trying to gag us. We're saying it's important for Francophone associations outside of Quebec. We agree we have to protect French outside of Quebec. But 90% of Francophones are in Quebec. It's the only state where they are in a majority situation. It's the only place where we could successfully integrate and make newcomers French to guarantee the future of French. And we can't do it because of the Official Languages Act that imposes institutional bilingualism. It comes to fund court challenges to Bill 101 and funds organizations that are working to prevent French as a common language and to ensure that there's more English everywhere. The federal government defines Anglophones as a first language speaker, which includes 33% of immigrants in Quebec. These are Statistics Canada documents that say this. To maintain our demographic weight in Quebec, we need 90% of French integration of newcomers. That's the minimum, and we're far from it. The federal government currently is openly working towards maintaining Francophones as a minority because they're providing services in English, not just in federal institutions, but in provincial and municipal institutions, in community groups, in unions, in every part of civil society. There's an effort towards making them English. Newcomers are choosing English. This is unacceptable. And what you're doing now by trying to gag this committee and not hearing the demands coming from Quebec, the Quebec government presented us with these requests. These proposed amendments were sent directly, and there's nothing about this in the bill. There's nothing about this in C-13. This is completely unacceptable. I know you don't want to hear the point of view coming out of Quebec, but I will talk to you about this quickly. The Quebec government is asking for some things. According to Quebec, the Official Languages Act does not take into consideration the special status of Quebec's linguistic situation. The Official Languages Act should recognize that the two official languages, of the two official languages, only French is a minority language. I was stunned by the speech from the throne because I was expecting that we would defend French outside of Quebec and English inside of Quebec. But then we added that there are 8 million Francophones in an ocean of 360 million Anglophones. So we were admitting that Quebec is part of this minority. And we are a minority in Canada, we're a minority on the continent, and we can't yet protect French as a common language without the federal government intervening to prevent us from doing this. We have to recognize that French is the only minority language. Even the UN has recognized this in one of their decisions. I've talked about it in the past, but it seems that we need to say it again. The UN does not recognize Anglophones in Quebec as a minority because they are part of the majority in Canada. Bill 101 wasn't satisfactory, so then we asked the majority in Canada that was undone with the Constitution in 1982, and it had the goal of doing what the federal government wasn't allowed to do directly because language was meant to be a provincial jurisdiction matter. We talk about the Official Languages Act as being the consequence of the Laurendeau-Dalton Commission. But this was not at all the objective. André Laurendeau wasn't striving for this. He was saying that he was sick of seeing Francophones having to beg for crumbs and asking for big crumbs and getting little crumbs. Before the Official Languages Act, it was difficult. We finally managed to get bilingual stamps, and then we got interpretation. Eventually, everything came late. Everything functioned in English at the federal government, and it was the same in Quebec. Our Constitution in 1867 said, point of order, Mr. Chair. Please stop. One moment, please. Mr. Drouin. I would like to thank my colleague for this history lesson, but we are talking about the administration of the bill and not the content of the bill. So Mr. Beaulieu is off topic. It has nothing to do with the content of the motion. So I don't want to cut him off, but he has to talk about the subject at hand. Well, it is definitely related because we're gagging Quebec again. Mr. Chair, Mr. Beaulieu, one moment, please. Mr. Drouin, I was going to say it, but there still is a connection between what Mr. Beaulieu is saying and the motion. But Mr. Beaulieu, I would like to ask you to bring it back to the motion if possible. But I would like to see the connection you're trying to draw. But please focus on the motion. Go ahead. Okay, the main point I'm trying to make here is that the Official Languages Act completely ignores Francophones in Quebec. This committee is a function of this bill, of this act, and Quebec can't afford, and, Quebecers, Francophones outside of Quebec can't afford to be ignored again. There used to be the language of use at home. 2.1% of Francophones outside of Quebec have French as a mother tongue. We're trying to help Francophones outside of Quebec, but it's not working. But I'd like to come back to one point. I think it's very important to hear what the Quebec government has to say. It's the only Francophone government in all of North America, and all we've managed to do is to say that Anglophones are a minority in Quebec, so the federal government will support Anglophones in Quebec with a series of programs to make sure that there's official languages in health and teaching in the official languages. And even in the 60s, when the Official Languages Act was enacted, even in Quebec, Anglophones represented the dominant class. They were an elite in Canada. Their institutions were overfunded. They were majority institutions. And in the 60s, after the Quiet Revolution, the Quebec government took a stronger foothold. And then the federal government said, we're supporting minority communities, Francophones and Acadians in Canada. And then they weren't even allowed to access French education for many generations. Statistics Canada was assessing the genesis of this movement to stop doing this in Canada, and it showed that 66% of francophones in Canada, outside of Quebec, were assimilated. Mr. Beaulieu, my apologies. Can you please bring it back to the motion? I think it's unacceptable to have a motion like this. It aims to prevent debate. This is unacceptable to Quebec. If you adopt this muzzle motion, you will demonstrate, indeed, that the only solution for the future of French in Quebec is independence. So, beyond myself, no one in this room wants this, but you're helping us to achieve this. The Official Languages Act, Quebec is asking for a differentiated approach, an asymmetrical approach, because you can't consider Anglophones in Quebec as a minority. It's not the same as being a Francophone outside of Quebec. And from the get-go, Francophone communities outside of Quebec should have received more support. The bulk of the money from the 70s until, what's that study, Où sont passés les milliards, said that 47% of the money went into Anglophone education institutions in Quebec when they were already overfunded. And then 30% of the funds went to French education outside of Quebec. And then we found that assimilation is continuing. It's continuing at a high speed and nothing's changing. I think we need to speak out against that. I'll bring it back to the motion that's on the table here. We're dividing Francophones in Canada by saying that Anglophones in Quebec are the same as Francophone minorities outside of Quebec. You're making us work against each other because the rights that are granted to Francophones outside of Quebec are granted to the Anglophones within Quebec, and they already have majority institutions. And if we bring it back to the proposal for an amendment here, is the president of the Treasury Board of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship should be invited to appear November 17th at the latest. Will all three of them come? What happens to our other witnesses? We had other witnesses that were going to come here and explain to you everything that I've just laid out. Next week is a break week, and that brings us to the 17th. So what we see here is that no one wants to hear from Quebec. And the statement in the speech from the throne and everything that the Liberals have said about protecting Quebec, French language in Quebec and outside of Quebec is really just smoke and mirrors. We continue to say, if we study Chapter 7 on positive measures, Anglophone organizations that are working actively to make immigrants English are continuing to receive funding. They're not even trying to get services in English for Anglophones. No, what they're trying to do is to make sure that newcomers choose English. This would increase their demographic weight, which is a trend that had already begun before the Official Languages Act and before Bill 101. Bill 101 has been able to counteract this, but it was quickly weakened by the federal government, especially after the Constitution in 1982. There were some principles in there that were useful for Francophones and Acadians. Point of order, Mr. Chair. Mr. Beaulieu, there's a point point of order. Mr. Seri, I believe. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Beaulieu might continue to speak on this history lesson that he's giving us. But, Mr. Chair, I was wondering if we should ask the witnesses should we excuse the witnesses and ask them to submit a written brief to the committee because the time for the first panel is almost over. And also I'd like to say that the Quebec government refused to appear before the committee. Mr. Généreux, is this also a point of order? Yes. Is this following Mr. Seri's comment about the witnesses? Yes. Go ahead. I don't agree with Mr. Seri. I think the witnesses should witness what's happening right now. I absolutely do not want them to miss this smoke show. I would like to speak to them about the motion that is on the floor right now. And I need to speak to Mr. Chartrand before he leaves. Okay, so we're debating a motion. Mr. Généreux and Mr. Godin want to take the floor. Mr. Seri, you didn't table a motion. It was a suggestion, so we can't debate a suggestion. So I'm going to do my job as chair. I'm not done speaking, Mr. Chair. No, of course, Mr. Beaulieu, I'm not forgetting you. I'm just trying to close the loop on Mr. Seri's statement. It's not a motion. For people who are watching and the witnesses, we can't debate a suggestion. So we will not excuse the witnesses. The witnesses can do what they like until the top of the hour. They have about 5 more minutes. They should stay here, and then after, there's a second panel. So now I'd like to come back to Mr. Beaulieu on the motion. And before you take the floor, I'm going in chronological orders. I have Mr. Viss, Mr. Généreux, and Mr. Godin after. Go ahead, Mr. Beaulieu. Point of order, Mr. Chair. I would like us to set the speaking order. I think there's some confusion. I have the clerk and I work on the speaking list. As I said in my introduction, we work together to identify who has manifested a desire to speak. So what I have is in chronological order. So Mr. Viss, Mr. Généreux, and Mr. Godin after Mr. Beaulieu. So Madam Clerk, does Madam Clerk know what the order of speaker is? My question for the clerk is that it's Mr. Viss, Mr. Généreux, Mr. Godin. I just clarified with them, and I'd like to confirm that indeed it's Mr. Généreux, Mr. Viss, Mr. Godin, Mr. Dalton. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The order is important. Généreux, Viss, Godin, Dalton. Okay, thank you for the correction, Madam Clerk. Great. Mr. Beaulieu, you have the floor. As you can see in point 2 of the motion, amendments to Bill C-13 should be submitted to the clerk in both official languages no later than 5 p.m. on November 17th. That is practically as soon as we come back from the break week. We had made requests. We wanted to increase the number of meetings. It's not that we don't want to move forward. It's not that we don't want to work. But what we're saying here is that this is the first time in 52 years that we've had the opportunity to amend this act. When Monsieur Laurendeau had made this request in an editorial in Le Devoir, Mr. Laurendeau is a federalist, and he considers Quebec as the home of Francophonie in Canada, and that because of this, Quebec should have special rights and to be considered as a nation. And this is not what happened.
Décédé du cancer entre.
In the meantime, he passed away from cancer, but it was more or less the last chance given to the federal government. He was an editorial writer who said it was like a royal commission on biculturalism and bilingualism. That's what it really was. And he wanted to study the issue from the points of view of the two peoples, the two founding nations of Canada. We can't exclude the First Nations, quite to the contrary, by saying that. But that was the philosophy behind the request for the B&B Commission. But there were opponents, Mr. Frank Scott, Mr. McGill, who opposed that. And it was Lester B. Pearson who seemed to be open to the question of French in Quebec and all that. In the meantime, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who became Prime Minister, he absolutely wanted to give no new power to Quebec. He even said Quebecers spoke a very poor French, a lousy French. And Mr. Beaulieu, come back to the motion, please. Please, the motion. So if I go back to the motion, then I am going back to the motion, Mr. Chair. Just a moment, Mr. Beaulieu. Just to put our cards on the table. First of all, the first hour has ended. It is my duty to say to the witnesses that they can remain if they wish, but I have to thank them. This is parliamentary life. These things happen. You are free to, as I often say to the witnesses, to complete the information that you might have wanted to have submitted in writing rather than in person, because this is a public meeting. I close the parenthesis now. Mr. Beaulieu, you can continue. But I do ask you, please, to concentrate on the motion. I'm entitled to speak. I've always been told that during the last session you filibustered for a very long time over We Charity. You didn't want to hear what we were saying about it, and I want my right to speak, my freedom of speech to be recognized here. Mr. Beaulieu, we've always managed our meetings in a very fair, impartial way. All I want to say is this. You can speak as long as you like. You have the floor. But the only thing that would allow me, would in fact require me as chair to intervene, would be if you get too far away from the motion itself. You have the motion in front of you. I'm here to hear you. The committee is here to hear you as well. But please stick to the motion. Next time, if there is redundancy and if you stray too far from the motion, while there is some sort of tenuous link with the motion, that's fine. But otherwise, I'll have to go on to Mr. Généreux. I believe that there is a very evident link because this is intended to cut off debate. It's a muzzle that has been done over the past years for Quebec. They don't invite Quebec representatives. They don't invite Quebec to the table at the Official Languages Committee. And there has been, if I said it and I repeated it before at other meetings, there is almost no group that advocates for the defense of French that has been invited. I contacted the minister's office. I had a group in mind. They were in agreement to appear. And they represent some 60 people in the eastern townships that were involved, and nobody was really speaking French in the same way that they were. So I can say that this motion, it certainly is not a motion that we would have expected. We have never prevented you from speaking. And I read Thursday in the motion, Thursday, 17th November, no later than Thursday, November 17, 2022. That means some things. One of which is, I find particularly deplorable, is that our witnesses have been excluded. They've already received they already received an email telling them not to come even before this motion was tabled. So they said the bloc only got 14% of the witnesses, but there were witnesses approved who weren't our witnesses, in fact. I want all witnesses to be able to be heard. They are witnesses who defend French everywhere in Canada, and I think that bringing this motion forward, well, really, we agreed last time that in camera that we would continue to hear witnesses until December 6th, that we would work twice as hard as we have been doing to be able to achieve that. But now I understand that it doesn't interest you at all to do that. You don't want to hear any more witnesses, and you want to fast-track this particular bill. It's for an Acadian Francophone chairing this. It's going to be bad for the Francophone Acadians. I put myself in their position. They are going to be assimilated, and we have to slow down that assimilation, if not stop it outright. Each member who's not a member of the committee, any independent member, should be contacted to inform them of the study of the bill by the committee and to invite them to prepare and submit any proposed amendments to the bill, which they would suggest that the committee consider during the clause-by-clause study of the bill. And that clause-by-clause consideration is very, very limited. I read, the committee proceed with clause-by-clause consideration of the bill no later than Tuesday, November 22nd, 2022. The minister comes the 17th, and if you haven't finished at the clause-by-clause, well, I think that there's going to be some major amendments to this particular bill. What is really a shame is for the minority of Francophone Acadians. Here again, once again, with a minority government, there was the opportunity to really change things. There was a true will to reverse that trend, to take a deep dive into modernizing the Official Languages Act. But it seems that the NDP, because of their agreement, has decided that Quebec was not important. I don't think that we have to accept that, Mr. Chair. And if you think that you're going to gag us with this, and then we'll just move on to something else, trust me, that will not be the case. In point 5 of the motion, when you see that all other remaining amendments would be deemed moved, that means that the amendments that we would bring forward, if they aren't passed, it would be your turn to speak and speak and speak and speak. And finally, there will be no amendments that will actually be passed. We saw a very important amendment that wouldn't change everything, but nonetheless was a small step in the right direction. That was part of the amendments coming out of Quebec, an amendment that was supported by all the former premiers of Quebec who still are alive, including the Liberal ones, supported by the major cities in Quebec, the major unions in Quebec, and it's the application of Bill of Law 111 at the federal level. But to date, the businesses haven't been touched at all. There's nothing in the Official Languages Act that says that businesses in Quebec are to be affected. I would say 2 or 3 years ago was a Liberal member who said there was never a complaint in French Quebec on the Official Languages Act. Well, I often hear people who come to me and who only speak French were in Quebec, truckers, for example, who are communicated with only in English. That endangers citizens, and that has an effect on the businesses. 111 was really weakened by the implementation, by its implementation and application in terms of federal regulations. But it's a bit like this motion here. The federal government was very hypocritical, if you allow me to say so, because it says we're going to let citizens free in terms of legal terms, but just if in Bill 101 was enacted in 77 rather, and they were greatly urged by the federal government to bring together other organizations, 2 or 3 merged. They were encouraged by the federal government, and the legal challenges, the court challenges program at that time existed. They were supported. But we wanted to know under the court challenges program how much was actually being spent in Quebec. Because that is something that really shores up our need to continue to hear witnesses, to hear what happened to that program, the court challenges program. But we've been told that, we can't disclose that because the government and the provinces in English Canada, if they know that there was funding in some sector or another, maybe they would be able to prepare or not. And so that could be difficult. But, it wasn't the people who sought independence. In Mr. Anthony Housefather, who was chair of a committee of the movement, and all that Anglophone movement was a very powerful lever for the federal Liberals, as well as for the provincial Liberals, who fund the Anglophone community and who fund the allophones who come to Quebec, the new arrivals to Quebec, to learn to speak English. So everything goes against French in the communities. We didn't hear a lot about certain things, but unfortunately, when I got there, I was told that this committee always works well. It's already it's always unanimous. But that was before the arrival of the Bloc Québécois that defends Francophone interests. But there was nobody there who exclusively defended the interests of Quebec uncompromisingly. If Quebec is going to count victories, well, it is very contradictory in terms of English Canada. I grew up in an Anglophone environment. I have nothing against Anglophones, but it's not a reason to allow Quebecers to become assimilated. Of course, it hurts the Francophones outside of Quebec because it obliges the Quebec government to challenge the measures the mandatory measures, the language clauses that we talk about. And Quebec is not too interested but it wants to have, though, its word to say in terms of the support that the federal government gives to lobby groups, Anglophone lobby groups. So all these Anglophone institutions are there. The health system in Quebec, as an example, to show you the impact. Alliance Québec has worked a long time, and the government changed the Social Services the Social Services Act, was amended. There was Bill 117 that was enacted there, and then the funding was no longer being provided in that way by the federal government. The doors were closed because there was no more money, but the federal government organized itself in parallel with the QCGM in Quebec to bring together all those organizations involved in that operation. And it continued, to have access in English. Nobody is against Anglophones having health services in their language. But outside of Quebec, studies said that 50% of Quebecers don't have access to health services in French. So for Quebec with Anglophones, no matter where they are, they have access to health services in English. But it's such a broad issue that there are more Francophones, more allophones that have to work in English. They are obliged to because there is institutional bilingualism in many institutions, and that's more or less what is happening. So to come back to the motion, point number 5, I believe, is probably the worst, the most serious, because if we haven't finished a clause-by-clause consideration of the bill on Thursday, December 1, and it's coming fast. It's coming fast. If it's not done by Thursday, December 1st, all remaining amendments will be deemed to have been moved. And if there's no further debate, well, what's going to happen then? Those amendments will not be passed. They won't even be tabled. So that motion brings me to a lack of debate or insufficient debate on the bill itself. It won't be really amended. And this is really an historical opportunity for us. I say this for the Acadians. It's a golden opportunity because in a minority government, the opposition parties are all in agreement on one issue. We could do something truly significant for the Acadian Francophone community and change the movement, the trend of what is happening. It is extremely important, Mr. Chartrand, I would say, because that demonstrates that there are changes that have to be sought in this area. And if you want to have one central agency, say Treasury Board, but the Liberals don't want that. We've been talking about this for 6 years now, but they're resisting. We don't have we don't have Treasury Board. We have Heritage Canada as the central agency, so it's not settling anything. It's really become a matter of political will. You look at that, if there's no political will, when you look at that, when you have a Governor General who doesn't speak French, the Lieutenant Governor in New Brunswick doesn't speak French, the Liberal government that brings them into the courts to challenge that. And there are people who didn't want us to react. Mr. Chair, all these points, what that shows is that's just smoke and mirrors. And for the Francophones outside of Quebec, I say these are people who are true warriors, who fight a battle. They fight heroically just to try to live, not completely in French, but to speak French every day. And in those witnesses that we have succeeded in hearing, whether it's in Vancouver or elsewhere, they wanted to have services in French, but they don't get them.
Tanny?
You know, in British Columbia, there are so few places where Francophones are in the majority. You know, there used to be places where there was a critical mass of Francophones. And we went and looked at the last census, and the numbers are dwindling. Mr. Lepage came and spoke to us, and this is another witness that was bringing a very important perspective. I don't remember if he said it here or if it was personal communication. He was saying, yeah, we can bring immigrants, but he gave the example of an African newcomer who sent their kids to French school here, but then a year later, they were transferred to English school because there's no way that you can live in French in British Columbia. They don't want to carry the weight of a minority language group like that. And unfortunately, the Anglophone majority provinces have no regrets about the fact that they've produced laws that prevented Francophones from accessing French education. And let's also think about les Métis with Louis Riel in Manitoba. Let's talk about Acadians. You know, we've been criticized for not wanting to swear an oath to the Queen, but you know, the Acadians were deported because they refused to pledge allegiance to the Queen. You know, this is all unacceptable for all of these reasons. And the Quebec government's demands were not heard. We were told earlier that no ministers wanted to participate in committee proceedings. Now there's a new one. We'll see what happens. But they tried something new, something that's never been seen before. They sent in amendment proposals in the name of the Quebec government to this committee. And I didn't hear anything about it. No one talked about it. We talked about it, but what are these demands? I'd be curious to hear if those on the other side of the table are aware of it. I don't think anyone is aware of what the Quebec government wants. It's like they don't care. You know, the Quebec government's requests are very reasonable. They are currently overfunding English universities and institutions. They're not just overfunded by the federal government, they're also overfunded by the Quebec government. And from the get-go, there's just constant fake news. Bill 101 never tried to prevent Anglophones from having their own institutions. It was part of Bill 101 and on the white paper on Bill 101. And I think at that time, 75% of immigrants were choosing English. That's how we were getting converted to a minority group. There was also a case where young students had to go to a closed school because the government, their school was closed because the Quebec government had to fund English schools. Meanwhile, in English Canada, French education was forbidden for Francophones. And meanwhile, in Quebec, we were overfunding English schools to make sure that newcomers could receive an English education. There are school commissioners that I met with. These people were very devoted. They weren't revolutionary or anything. Some of them very pious, and they said that they looked into what was being done elsewhere. Say, for example, in the United States. Are there French schools in the United States? Can you have English or French schools in Italy? Private ones, sure, but no public ones. And that's what led to a referendum, a plebiscite at the time. They were elected on this mandate, which was to accept newcomers in French schools. And then the Anglophones started took to arms. As Chair, Mr. Beaulieu, I have to say that I have a very liberal interpretation of what would relate to this motion, but right now I'm going to have to ask you to focus because some other people would like to speak. Well, I will concentrate on the motion. I know that Mr. Godin asked for the floor. He wanted to present an amendment. If he takes the floor, can I respond to his amendment? For every amendment, everyone has the opportunity to speak. These are the rules. I don't want to stop you, Mr. Beaulieu, but it's my duty to do so. There are two reasons that we can prevent someone from keeping the floor. It's if they're redundant or if they're not debating the motion. I'm really trying to find a connection here. I think that I'm very permissive here. But you know, in our own practices in jurisprudence, we tend to be more permissive, but I'm really trying to find the link that you're trying to build. Well, I'm still talking about official languages acts, and the connection here is that all of these aspects were not heard here in the committee. I don't think that people are aware of these factors. We'll try to spread this information generally, but from what I've heard, the Liberal government says that it conducted consultations, but I don't think there are many Quebecers that know that almost 100% of the money that's spent in Quebec on official languages goes to funding English lobbying groups and advocacy groups. And then the rest of it goes to French institutions to allow them to teach English, or to teach English to healthcare professionals, or to teach provincial public servants to speak English. So the Official Languages Act only serves one goal in Quebec, is to keep Francophones in the minority over time. Lord Durham's plan, I hate to have to say it, when we look at what's happening here and what's happening at the Department of Immigration, Lord Durham's plan is being applied very effectively by the federal government. I'd like to give the floor to my colleague, and I will react to his amendment. So the new speaking order would be Mr. Généreux, Mr. Viss, and Monsieur Dalton, and then Mr. Godin. Is that correct, Madam Clerk? So, Mr. Généreux, did you understand, Mr. Chair? Inaudible to the interpreter. The microphone is off. One moment, Mr. Généreux. Mr. Godin, I didn't understand your last question. What did you say? I said that I wanted to speak to... I would like the floor. For everyone who's listening, when someone tables an amendment, we'll hear a debate on the amendment. Mr. Chair, I would like to clarify one thing. Unfortunately, you're working remotely and you don't see what's happening on the ground, but right now, Mr. Beaulieu asked to speak after all of the speakers that you just mentioned. So I'll repeat the order. It's Généreux, Viss, Dalton, Godin, and then Beaulieu. That's it. That's what I have. Mr. Généreux, you have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to personally apologize to the witnesses about my signature on a report that sought to give school boards more autonomy to purchase federal buildings. My apologies that this has not been possible until now. I can't speak for the Liberals, but they also should apologize. Rules have been changed, and this is a great example, a tangible example of what's possible to do outside of a law within a law. So instead of making it part of the law, we act by regulation. What's shocking here is one of the signatories of this document is now the Minister of the Treasury Board. What hypocrisy when you think about it. She would come here and get outraged and defend the rights for francophones and that they would have more opportunities and that they would have access to more buildings for education. Mr. Sanson, who was such a strong advocate, that they accept that this happens today with the law that we already have and that currently we're debating an act that is seeking to amend an act to prevent such a situation from happening again. I mean, this is kind of shit. You know, my colleague is correct. We haven't heard anything from Quebec. This is a constitutional grade act, and Mr. Godin is right. We have been cooperative. Indeed, I've been sitting on this committee since 2009 with the exception of 2011 to 2015. We were always able to produce reports. There were never dissenting reports from committee members from either side of the table. We've always been able to work well together. Despite everything we've accomplished, I think that we have to recognize right now that we failed. How have we failed? We failed with a Liberal government, a current Liberal government that's using regulations to change the facts so that you can't have access to federal buildings. I'm really blown away by this. It's unbelievable. Again, I would like to apologize to you sincerely on this front. The FCFA presented here and has appeared many times over the years. And they're all pushing us. Our witnesses are all pushing us to adopt this act quickly. But the problem here is that we're going to adopt the act and then it will be managed by regulation, just like everything else that happens. I'm not trying to say that we're so virtuous and they're not. When we'll come into power, you know, the Minister of the Treasury Board is changing the rules despite what she was advocating for many years. Anyways, everyone agrees that we need a champion within the government. We need a champion under the Treasury Board. Everyone agrees with that. And I'm convinced that they'll want to adopt this act without this being integrated in the act. Ms. Ashton, I can't see you, but your hand is still not up. You're not even asking to speak or to propose amendments to the resolution that's on the table. Mr. Généreux, I have to interrupt you. You have to speak through the chair. Mr. Chair, I see that Ms. Ashton's hand is not up. The MP's hand is not up. They're not even speaking to this motion or proposing amendments. So I have to draw a conclusion here. Certainly she's going to support this motion. This is a gag motion. This is a complete gag order from the government on this act. And this is a constitutional level act. This is such an important issue for all of Canadian francophonie within Quebec and outside of Quebec. Who's going to speak for Quebec? You know, the ministers, the three ministers, and I'm speaking to the motion here. You know, you accused Mr. Beaulieu from straying too far from the content of the motion. I won't do that. But you're suggesting three witnesses, three ministers in a single meeting. You know, next week we're not there. So we're going to come back and it will be November 15th and 17th and you're expecting us to have them appear in one meeting. Mr. Sanson, of course, is laughing across the table. Of course, we're not going to be able to hear from all of them. This is ridiculous. We need to have these witnesses appear. We've been waiting for them since June. They've been on the witness list since the start, and they haven't been able to appear. This is an unacceptable resolution, and I will let my colleague, Mr. Godin, take over eventually so that he can propose some amendments, because we will definitely not vote in favor of this motion. And I certainly hope that Mrs. Ashton, Mr. Chair, will follow as well, that the NDP, an opposition party, will act with such hypocrisy and support a motion like this one. Mr. Généreux, I would ask you, please, to withdraw your last statement. What's my last statement? You know what? We are all hypocrites. I'll even include myself. You know, French is declining in Canada, Mr. Généreux. I'm asking you to withdraw your last statement that was targeting a specific member of the committee. I'm not done speaking, Mr. Chair. I'll withdraw that last sentence, my last two sentences. The government's actions. You know, I remember when they were in the opposition in 2009, 2011. I remember this very well. They were making a big stink about conservatives and how we were this, that, and the other thing. And right now, they're doing the same, even worse than what we did back in the day. Because right now, we're talking about revising an act. This isn't just a rule. We're not just talking about letting school boards build buildings. No, this is a constitutional act that we are modifying. Anyways, you know, I'd also like to know if the Minister for Canadian Heritage accepted our invitation. So I think it's important that he be there, because Canadian Heritage is currently responsible for certain applications of regulations that are changing willy-nilly from one day to the other, and hopefully that won't be the case in the future. But anyways, I would like us to enshrine this act. I think this this issue of school boards that are trying to buy buildings, they just want a right of first refusal. They're not trying to buy everything. I think this is a very normal thing to do. It's something that's possible. It's simple. Anyways, Mr. Chair, I'll stop here, because I think I'm going to get a little wound up. This is a passionate debate, I understand. In chronological order, I have Mr. Viss. Mr. Viss, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, and very happy to have this opportunity to speak to this motion today. I joined this committee largely because I am one of the few Western Canadians that has a general knowledge of, a good working knowledge of the French language. And I'm also committed, like many British Columbians are, to a country where children are able to receive an education in one of the two official languages of their choice. And I saw this bill as an opportunity to enshrine the constitutional right of my children and many other parents in Mission, Matsqui, Fraser Canyon to learn in French. As a parent, when I think about education, I think about three things. I think about English, French, and mathematics. And what I see in this bill here is an opportunity to get something right on the French side for not only language minorities in British Columbia, but for all of the parents in British Columbia that want to give their kids the opportunity to speak in both official languages because their sense of Canadian identity is enshrined with that principle. But we are not living up to a standard in this country that gives children that opportunity. So with the motion here before us today, I just frankly don't understand why the government members put this forward. We've been working so well together in good faith. It's a very collegial, professional environment. And all they had to do was come to us before and work out some proper dates. But instead, they took a hammer and fist approach that catches us off guard and leads to us wasting time. We all want to see C30, like everyone around this table wants to see, especially wants to see the French language augmented outside of Quebec and protected in Quebec. Our party, the Conservative Party, has been very clear about that. And I think it's the same for everyone around this table. But if the government members think that they can slam something down our throat, and I think the word in like un bâillon d'une motion, or un connerie d'une motion, and think we're just going to sit here and take it, I'm sorry, but we're not. We have to work together. This is not I don't see this as a partisan committee, but that's what it's turned into today, and that's unfortunate. For example, on point one of the motion, it talks about with the break week coming up next week, that le président du Conseil du Trésor, le ministre de
The president of the Treasury Board, the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, and who's the other one? And perhaps the Minister of Heritage.
Two ministers appear in one meeting isn't quite sufficient. Like, I know, as it was referenced today, that the Treasury Board Secretariat was a member of this committee before and had put forward reports in this committee talking about the need to preserve French language. In my province of British Columbia, this is especially important because we don't know where any federal funds are going in respect to promoting the French language or even supporting the school districts in British Columbia to offer a reasonable access to French. For those of you who don't understand, in British Columbia right now, if you want to have a place in a French immersion school, you have to go in a lottery. It's not just offered. You have to be chosen by a lottery system. That is not a good way of promoting French language or even offering it. And then if you're lucky enough to get a spot in a French language school, you're going to have to deal with the crapshoot that's going on in my school district right now, whether you're even going to get a French teacher. My son's in a French immersion program at Centennial Elementary, and they haven't had a full-time school teacher since September because they can't find anyone that actually speaks French that will commit to his classroom. So the way I see it is that the Ministry of Education has let down my child and all of the other children he goes to school with. He's at a critical year in grade 1, both for getting a general comprehension of the language and in his natural development to learn to read and write not only in one official language but in two. So this law has real consequences for kids. And we talk a lot about federal workplaces in this law. We talk a lot about bilingualism, federal places of work in the private sector. Well, guess what? We're never going to have a private sector worker in British Columbia that's regulated through a federal workplace be able to meet the language requirements if we're not addressing what's happening in the school systems right now with my son and the other kids he goes to school with. So on point one of the motion, we need more than one meeting with multiple ministers to deal effectively with some really key amendments that have come forward related to linguistic clauses for French education and possible amendments on that front. That's my first point, Mr. Speaker. And then, Mr. President. Secondly, I think we need to look very, very carefully about the clauses in this motion regarding, which are essentially time allocation clauses. I don't believe in amendments that are going to put such a time frame on this. It's already been repeated that since June, there's been demands to have some of the ministers, members of the government come before this committee. Obviously, the House Leader is working behind the scenes with the Parliamentary Secretary, trying to get them here, but then again, to put it into a motion and bring that before committee is not the way to do this. We all know that we want to get this bill to debate stage again at third reading and into the Senate, but you got to work with us. You got to work with the Conservatives government if you want to see that happen. I could go on, but again, so point 4 of the motion, the committee proceed with clause-by-clause consideration of the bill no later than Tuesday, November 22nd, doesn't give us enough time to address some of the witness testimony that has come forward, especially in my province of British Columbia, where we're having an educational crisis in respect to French language, access, and training that we're not going to address in an appropriate way before this bill goes forward unless we give it an adequate amount of time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci, Mr.
Thank you.
But thanks a lot. We'll give the floor now to Mr. Dalton. Mr. Dalton, the floor is yours.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair.
I must say that I'm very disappointed in seeing this motion being brought forward by the Liberals. Yeah, first of all, I think that as a committee, we should apologize to the witnesses that have been invited here. That are important witnesses. We didn't finish hearing the first panel, and then there's a second panel, and so that we're missing. And this motion has essentially hijacked the process. We're hearing even less, and I guess I'm really disappointed because for month after month we heard witnesses coming here and providing valuable input to this committee from coast to coast, every province, Quebec. And the least we can do is to take them seriously and to make sure that what we put forward is not just a report, but an excellent report. And that's what we want to do. I know the Conservative Party, Conservative members on this committee, want to have a projet de loi, a bill that is excellent. And I think what is going on here? I have to ask myself, why would the Liberals do this? It would seem like they're being supported by the NDP, but that's time will tell. Why would the Liberals do this? Just try to ramrod this report. And I think one of the reasons is that we heard many testimonies, many witnesses that shared their frustration how a bill has been delayed and delayed year after year after year and nothing happened. And now it seems to me that what the Liberals are wanting to do is to bring out a report and say, oh, let's get this through right now, so that they can maybe say, oh, the reason why this has all been delayed for these years has nothing to do with us. Wash their hands clean of all their incompetence, the delay. They speak on both sides of their mouth, saying they're in support of the bill, but showing something else. So I think that this motion seems to be that it's trying to focus the blame. I think also that this motion is a way of maybe hiding their own ministers, trying to pack them all 1 hour. They're the ones that they know the files, and they can best answer the questions that will help us with the report. So I think that this is very important. So it seems to me that a lot of this is show and then limiting the amount of time. And I think that is very disrespectful to the committee, to Parliament, to say, oh, it's got to be done by such and such a time, and we're losing this whole meeting today, by December the 1st, or we're going to give it to the power of the chair to do what he wants to do and add the amendments. Like, this is just inappropriate and railroading the committee, and just not an effective, not the way the committee needs to be functioning in a way that's collaborative, which we have been doing. And I think, as has been mentioned, that all the members here want to see this bill go forward. Donc, à ce moment-ci,
At this time, I will give the floor to my colleague, Mr. Gaudin. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dalton. Mr. Chair, it is your ruling. It is your decision. Thank you, Mr. Dalton. Thank you. But I will say you have the floor, Mr. Gaudin. I was waiting for my right to speak. Thank you. Thank you. Chair, first of all, I find it very unfortunate, and I want to speak to the witnesses of the first panel and the second panel. I present my apologies. Unfortunately, the government moved a motion through its parliamentary secretary for official languages. They knew very well that the witnesses were going to lose their time here today. I find that shocking, and I apologize on behalf of the Conservative Party of Canada. I want to look at the motion. I want to also go back to what's been happening since June. If you look at motions tabled on June 13, we asked the Minister of Heritage, Treasury Board, and others to appear, 2 hours per department. That was supported here in committee. 6 October, there was a motion that in the study of C13, we ask that the Minister of Official Languages, Heritage Canada, Treasury Board be invited for 2 hours on October 18th to appear as soon as possible. There was consent. On 27th October, I renewed my request. But now the ministers have done indirectly what they didn't want to do directly through the motion that was passed. Now we have this motion on the table. Out of respect for all Quebecers who speak French, French-speaking Quebecers, all Francophones in Canada, I want to move an amendment to the motion that was moved by my colleague, Mr. Serré, Parliamentary Secretary for Official Languages. I won't say that he's just being the messenger for the Privy Council. But here's my amendment. Point 1, I want to see added after Treasury Board the Minister of Heritage, of Canadian Heritage. On the 6th line, following immigration, refugees, and citizenship, you add as well their officials. And just a minute, Mr. Gaudin. You've lost me. On point 1, I've sent it to the clerk, Mr. Chair. I might ask the clerk to send it out so everybody can understand my amendments, rather. I will read it out, though. If you want to go quickly, I will repeat it. Inaudible. What I was saying, Mr. Chair, was that after Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, as well as their officials, be invited to appear for 2 hours per minister per separate meeting by the latest Thursday, 24th November. So we changed the 17th for the 24th. Point 2, where you read November 17, you put in November 24. So this is good faith on the part of the official opposition. So we correct the 18th for the 25th November. On point 4, we add Tuesday, 29 November instead of November 22nd. And we completely eliminate, we delete point 5, so as not to limit the clause-by-clause consideration of this very important bill. This is the amendment that I submit, and if there is anybody who wishes to debate my amendments, I'm ready to answer questions. We'll take a few seconds to receive that in writing. Clerk, have you sent it? I see it now on my screen. Excuse me, but it is in Chinese code. But perhaps when it was uploaded, perhaps it's the second official language that is just coming. Oh, okay, it's better now. Has everybody had the opportunity to read the amendment? Nobody is saying no, so this is the amendment that has been moved. I don't know if there are other amendments, but if there are other amendments, I just want you to know that the floor is open. Are there any questions with respect to Mr. Gaudin's proposed amendment? Questions? I don't see any questions. I'm sorry I asked for the floor. Sorry, Mr. Beaulieu. I see it's hard for me to see you from so far away. Well, it's okay. On the one hand, the proposed amendment makes sense because it gives a greater possibility for debate. But I always tell myself, I wonder, why do you have to find such quick solutions here? We have Acadians, we have Franco-Ontarians. I have to interrupt because we're on an amendment, so you have to speak only to the amendment. On the amendment, wait, I'm just going to read it. It's my duty. Forgive me for interrupting. Well, on the amendment, I say that it is important to have point 1, to hear the ministers, that they appear for 2 hours on separate meetings. I don't know. I think that the Minister of Immigration, I think, should occupy 2 hours for sure. We know that within that department there are very aberrant things that are occurring, goals and objectives. So it would be illogical if you keep the Minister of Immigration and staff here. No explanation. 90%, almost 90% of the students, when they ask to go into an English institution, they're accepted, but in the reverse, for French, not always the same thing. I have demonstrated personally before the Immigration and Refugee Board status because he was not allowed, the counsel for the client was not allowed to plead in the language of his client, French. And now we're going to have Mr. Dion. That is for the first part. I have to remind you, Mr. Beaulieu, that the first part of the amendment that has been moved, it speaks to appear for 2 hours per minister in separate meetings only. Point number 2, yes, point number 2. So the amendments would be submitted to the clerk in official languages no later than 5 p.m. on Thursday, November 24th, 22nd. I'd put that a little further, December 6th. December 6th. I think this is a bit strange because we met, we agreed to a procedure. We agreed on a procedure, a specific number of meetings to hear as many witnesses as possible. And on December the 6th, it was supposed to be voted on in good and due form. I understand, Mr. Beaulieu, but about the amendment, please. Well, part of my sub-amendment would be for point 2. Instead of November 24th, it would be December 6th in both official languages. No later, and for the second part, 7 December. That's for the second part, or point 2 of the amendment, because I know, of course, we want to meet with the ministers and have the time necessary to hear them, but there is testimony that's very important to hear. And I look at this, and I think that we should hear a witness who would speak to the impact about the lobby groups, Anglophone lobby groups, the impact that they have on Quebec that are funded by the federal government. That's the federal government that's speaking through them. So it's very important that that group be heard. Mr. Beaulieu, please. And just a moment. Your argument on point number 1, if I understand correctly, you're in agreement with what's there. but you have a sub-amendment to move for point number 2 on Mr. Godin's amendment. Yes, that Thursday, 24th November become December 6th. And November 25 should be December 7th.
Before going any further, before we get lost, I think we'll do one sub-amendment at a time. That's the best way of proceeding, because otherwise we will get very confused. Mr. Beaulieu, you had other things to say. We'll get back to that after. So on the sub-amendment, no. Your sub-amendment to the amendment, you know, I would like us to adjourn the meeting and continue. I can't go past 1 p.m. We have to suspend in 2 minutes. We have less than 2 minutes left. I have 12:59. Point of order, Mr. Chair. I think my colleague is proposing that we adjourn the debate, and I think we have to manage that now, and we can see for the rest. I didn't realize he wanted to adjourn right after the sub-amendment. Is that correct? No, I'm seeking to adjourn the meeting. Okay, I thought you wanted to vote on the first sub-amendment first. Well, we will have to adjourn the meeting because our time is up. Meeting adjourned until next Thursday. Next Thursday, you will resume where you were at the start of the next meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're suspended.